classic Parmigiani Tonda was designed years ago by Michel Parmigiani, and it's still one of the most elegant watches on the market. With the arrival of Guido Terreni at the helm of Parmigiani Fleurier, the brand launched a revamped version into the Tonda line. It's the Tonda PF, now tapping into the sports elegance watch. It is based on the classic Tonda and it shows the typical Parmigiani elegance. It truly embodies the vision of offering subtle, discreet and understated luxury. And of course, like we've come to expect from Parmigiani Fleurier, it shows proper, pure craftsmanship. We're going to talk to Guido Terreni and find out more. Guido, Parmigiani Fleurier stands for a certain distinctive style. How would you describe that style?
Well, Parmigiani Fleurier is founded on two important values. The first is understatement, and this is part of the style. And the second is cultural knowledge and watchmaking. Both come from restoration, from Michel Parmigiani himself. Like a father gives its children its imprinting, its values, you do the same with the brand. So the style is really a refined, understated luxury. What is the typical Parmigiani client? Well, of course, you address a person which is very educated in luxury, and it is understated. It's somebody who is not ostentatious, is not loud, is discreet, but it's very refined. So you have to have a style which copes with this personality, and it's usually very subtle. So our style, you can condensate it as minimal because it's an apparent simplicity, where the style is extremely pure in aesthetics, but the craft is extremely deep in the making.
So it's definitely not first-time buyers?
No, I would say it's for people who enjoy a private luxury.
What did you try to inject in the new Tonda PF collection when it was relaunched?
Well, when I took over the brand, it was the beginning of 2021, and the brand had 25 years, and it struck me at the beginning because it was a brand that in very short time at the beginning was able to position itself as extremely prestigious. And so I tried to dig into what was that kind of client 25 years ago, what kind of personality he has. And you go back to what I said about this refinement, this understatement. But in time, in these 25, 26 years, we behave differently from the end of the 90s. We're less formal, but that doesn't mean you have to be less elegant. So you have to readapt a style that was very classic at the beginning to something more fresh, and having in mind that client, what he would be today, in his 30s, in his 35s, in his early 40s. And the Tonda PF was the response, because you are going into today's way of wearing a watch, which is, I would define it, an impeccable informality, if you want. No, you're not going towards a formal elegance, but you're going towards an elegance that is never outplaced in the different ways that you behave during the day. And that's why we chose a metal bracelet kind of watch, and also a sport chic segment, if you want, in the industry, but not doing it by going and benchmarking what the others are doing, digging into our values and how we would interpret that style. And it came out with the Tonda PF, especially the micro rotor, which is the founding father of the collection.
It's very refined, very thin. There's one thing that always stood out to me, because you say Parmigiani immediately proposed as one of the top players. Do you have an idea why that was?
Goes back to the origin. Michel, when he founded this brand, he injected all his knowledge of restoration. When you're restoring history of watchmaking, you're restoring the best. You know, the Breguets, all the creators of the history, and your work has to disappear. So that's where understatement comes from, because you're working on somebody else's work and you don't have to appear. So big craft, big knowledge and understatement come from restoration. When you have faced and treated all these techniques, you go back in time, you have a sensitivity to finishings, to refinement, to the decorative elements, but that are not invasive to the brand. And that's why when he started, he put all his knowledge in his brand. And people who are knowledgeable, not people who are following a marketing plan of a brand and they don't judge, they don't discern. No? You're talking to an elite of connoisseurs. And that's why the brand was so prestigious at the beginning. And then, like many things can happen in life to everybody, it got a little bit lost in the last decade, and now we're putting it back at the center of its values.
And but also the vertical integration, do you think that played a big role in all that?
Again, it goes back to restoration, because when you are a restorer, you do everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, you lose a screw, you have to redo it. Exactly. It's one day work. And it's so when Michel approached his brand, he did it as a restorer, so he wanted to master his craft. Then, of course, the volume of the brand was not enough to guarantee a sustainable industrial equipment, if you want. Mm-hmm. So it was decided to open to other brands, very high-end brands, of course, this savoir-faire, but it remains an integration which was born to serve the brand, and now it serves a few high-end brands that are at the top of the industry.
The notion of comfort and wearing comfort, elegance is also very present. Can you say something about that?
This is one of the most hidden secrets of Parmigiani Fleurier. You cannot convey through a picture or through, you have to wear it to understand how comfortable they are. And it was the first thing that struck me when I entered the company, and I put on a watch, and it was incredibly suiting my wrist and comfortable. So there are things that are into the making of the design which are subtle that you don't know. For instance, the glass is always the one who's carrying the weight of the watch. It's not, the lugs don't have to touch your skin, or they have to just touch it lightly. So when you look at the back of the case, you would see that there is an invitation that lowers the glass in order that your watch fits on your wrist in a comfortable way. And this I didn't notice, I just noticed after when I had the experience. Even in the micro rotor you have a little invitation. It's not a complete flat back case, because it's like a suit. You wear it on your shoulder. It's the shoulder who carry the weight of the suit. No, and the watch is the same. It's the back case that carries the weight of the watch. And if it fits properly, and it's not all the elements of the watch have to fit the wrist. If I look at the bracelet is not semi-rigid, because it's not a designer who decides which is the arc of your wrist. You have a different arch of your wrist than mine. So my bracelet has to do this. Because there is a moment in which this arch, which is a semi-rigid arch, is not enough, because your wearability requires in that moment a different angle. So that's part of wearability. So all these elements go into the comfort of making a watch.
To me, it's a super comfortable watch. I'm wearing it now for a few hours. The lugs are very recognizable. Always typical of the Tonda collection. I really like that. But what are the typical things that have been added to this watch?
Well, when you try to do something authentic into a brand, you have to go and dig into the values of the brand. So when you design something that has to be typically Parmigiani, you have to dig into the aesthetic codes and understand if they fit to the client that we described. So being a private luxury, being something non-ostentatious, the first thing we did, we took out the logo. So you don't have Parmigiani Fleurier written on it, but we went to, we found this beautiful PF ellipse with the letters of PF inside, which was designed by Michel in the early days of the brand. And it was a seal that you use to stamp the gold cases to pass the customs, because that is the indication to custom, which is the producer of the case that certifies the weight of the gold. And for custom reasons, you have to have the mark of the seal of it. And as everything done by Michel is done aesthetically also, he designed an aesthetic seal to be placed there. But it was hidden. It was on the case, it was on the crown, it was on the oscillating mass, things that you don't see when you wear the watch. So we decided to place it at 12 o'clock on the dial, and that was enough to convey the brand because of discretion, because of elegance, because of private luxury. The logo is for the others, it's not for yourself. It's enough and it's elegant. Then you go into the other aesthetic codes, which are the lugs that you mentioned, so the teardrop lugs that we modernized, that are the nurdle basil, which is another element that started from the Torix in the past, but it's done in a different way on the Tonda. Then you go into the finishings of the dial. Guilloche is part of the brand, but guilloche goes back in the 19th century as an aesthetic. So it's very classic, it's very old-fashioned. How can we bring into the 21st century such a technique which is extremely nice and beautiful? So we did it by miniaturizing it, by doing the design so small that you almost don't see it. Because today people want a plain dial, people want something simple, but if you do it plain, it may be dull. If you do it with a texture that you see and you don't see, it's like the cloth of the suit. When you touch it, it's even nicer, no? And it gives you that refinement. Then we open the dial so much. The small indexes that you see, the people who say, oh, they're too small, I'm not used to that big opening. And then you get addicted to that because you don't need markers to tell the time, you just need two hands. So these are just a support in the reading and that open up the dial. Then you have the bracelet, the finishings, the comfort that we discussed. So these are all elements that are making all together like a recipe where the ingredients are very balanced, something extremely refined, long-lasting in the style. And last but not least is the palette of colors of the dials, because the dials, we chose this gray, which is not gray. We had some brown in it to make it more warm, to make it more emotional. And they are inspired by a palette of Le Corbusier, which is a Swiss architect that in the 31 defined this association with the colors and your mood and your life. He was an architect, so he applied it to home, to where you live. But if you look at those colors, they are extremely subtle, they are not obvious, they are timeless, they are not for a season or two. We leave that to fashion. Our beauty has to last in time. So also the chromatic choices are very thought.
And the GMT rattrapante is like typical Parmigiani. It's complex, yet elegant and refined. Why a GMT rattrapante, and can you say much more about that watch?
When I entered the company, it was January 21. We were locked down. We had over a year of not traveling. I mean, everybody wanted to celebrate traveling again. So we said, well, let's do a GMT, but let's do it the Parmigiani way. And when the Parmigiani way is about discretion, is about subtle ideas that are not invasive, that are intriguing, but is not in your face, it had to be a very pleasant experience. So when I travel, and I travel a lot, I hate to change the time with the crown because the minute should not be interested by a changing of a time zone. Mm-hmm. You should change only the hour. That's why you press a push button, and the push button is at 8 o'clock because it's a more natural position to press something. If you're at 9, you're already twisting yourself. So that's ergonomicity, but it's also aesthetic because it fits into the lug in a very nice way. Mm-hmm. So then the other thing is when you go back home, you want to do it as quickly as possible. So we had the idea to, and this is a world premiere because nobody in the history of watchmaking ever used the rattrapante function outside the chronograph. We applied the rattrapante function to an hour of a GMT, so a dual time zone. So when you press the button in the crown, the monopoussoir, you are immediately united with home, and that's how you have a very simple way of wearing the watch. But when I don't travel, which is 70% of my time, I don't need a GMT. So we had to take out everything that was taking out the pleasure of having a two-hander on your wrist when you're at home. That's why you have not a 24-hour indication, because the two hands that overlap, they have to go around together. That's why you don't have a night and day indication, because you would have to bear the pain of looking at a hole with a white dot or a black dot when you're at your time zone. So we prefer the aesthetic rather than having a descriptive information that when you travel, you know, if you left your family at east or at west, ahead or behind times. So it's taking out everything that is redundant to have a very pure experience aesthetically and functionally.
Guido, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us and explain much more about the Tonda PF. To me it looks like a home run, very beautiful, elegant, subtle, exactly what you described. And I'm looking forward to see much more coming from Parmigiani Fleurier in the coming years.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much.